You're listening to When the Lies Began. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking into a story that so many of you followed, one that just unfolded in this horrifying way across social media and the news. The journey of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie.
That's right.
What strikes me and what we really want to investigate is this massive, almost unbelievable gap between the image, the curated perfection of van life they presented online, and the awful reality bubbling underneath. We're talking escalating control, manipulation, and ultimately homicide.
Exactly. We've gone through a lot of material for this: investigative reports, reviews of that crucial body cam footage, the civil lawsuit filings, forensic analyses. Our plan is to walk you through this chronologically.
Yeah, step by step.
We need to unpack the different layers of deception. The personal lies, the family silence, and maybe most importantly, the institutional failures. Because the core question we keep coming back to is this: how could such clear warning signs of real lethality risk that were actually documented, even filmed, how could they be so completely dismissed by the authorities?
It's baffling.
Yeah.
And that dismissal, it really enabled the worst possible outcome. So today we'll follow that path.
Yeah.
Starts with the shock, right? Seeing that illusion just shatter in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Then it moves into the suspicion and tension around Brian's silence, his evasion.
That calculated silence, yeah.
Followed by the awful revelation of the crime itself. And finally, we need to reflect. Reflect on the systemic failures, the blind spots that this case just ripped wide open. It's about what happens when the system sees the danger signs and just looks the other way.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The whole van life trip, this big adventure, it kicked off July 2nd, 2021. Gabby Petito, she was 22, and she really had hopes of making it as a travel influencer.
Right, that was the dream, documenting everything.
Exactly. She was posting photos, videos, trying to build that online presence, sharing this image of, freedom and happiness on the road. And it's really important to remember, she bought the van. It was her van, a white Ford Transit Connect she'd saved up for.
That ownership detail feels so significant now looking back, because behind all those sunny pictures, the reality, well, it was textbook coercive control.
Absolutely.
This wasn't an equal partnership. The evidence that came out later, texts, witness statements, it painted a picture of Brian isolating her, controlling where she went, apparently even forcing her out of her van during fights, making her walk alone.
And actively discouraging her creative efforts, too.
Yeah, undermining her blog, telling her the content wasn't good enough. It's just classic abusive behavior hidden behind this perfect Instagram filter. Domestic violence experts looked at this later and saw all the signs.
And that hidden reality, it burst into public view quite dramatically on August 12th, 2021, in Moab, Utah. That's the moment the carefully crafted image just cracked.
The 911 call.
Yes. At 4:39 in the afternoon, Grand County Dispatch gets a 911 call, someone reporting a domestic dispute right near the Moonflower Community Co-op. And the caller was specific, very clear. They said the gentleman was slapping the girl and hitting her repeatedly.
And then the police stopped them. We've all seen clips of that body cam footage. It's incredibly disturbing to watch. The contrast between them is just stark.
It really is.
Gabby is distraught, sobbing, shaking. She can barely see coherently. She keeps trying to explain it away, blaming her own anxiety, her OCD, basically trying to take responsibility for the whole conflict.
Oh, Brian.
Brian is the opposite. He's calm, almost casual, joking with the officers about little things, apologizing, but only for his driving, not for anything else. It's such a classic dynamic, isn't it? The perpetrator is relaxed, composed, while the victim is terrified and trying to manage the situation.
That dynamic directly influenced how the officers interpreted everything. Gabby immediately jumped to taking the blame for the physical part. She said she was the full-on aggressor, that she hit him first.
Why? Because he was telling her to shut up.
That's what she said. She explained she hit him because he kept telling her to shut up or calm down during an argument about, the van, their living situation, this kind of reversal where the victim absorbs all the blame and even defends the abuser. Experts call it textbook gaslighting. It's emotional terrorism, really, designed to make the victim doubt their own reality.
Okay, but hang on. Even if they bought her story that she hit first, there was physical evidence of his aggression, right? Didn't she tell them he grabbed her face, show them a cut?
She did. That's the crucial point. Despite accepting her narrative, the officers documented that she admitted Brian grabbed my face, I guess. She said it was forceful enough to leave a visible cut on her cheek. She even demonstrated the action for the officer.
So it wasn't just her word against his. There was an injury. They saw it. Why wasn't that the focus?
That facial injury.
Mm-hmm.
That is the absolute critical miss in Moab. Forensic experts who specialize in domestic violence, they are incredibly clear on this. Any grabbing or injury to the face, the neck, the head, what's legally often termed aggravated assault, in these contexts, it's a major high-risk indicator for future strangulation.
Wow.
We're not talking about minor pushing or shoving here. The statistics are chillingly precise. A victim who has been strangled even one time by their partner is 750% more likely to eventually be murdered by that same partner.
750%.
Yes. So when Gabby admitted he grabbed her face forcefully enough to injure her, alarm bells should have been screaming. But the Moab officers, they just failed to properly document it, let alone investigate it as the primary assault. They fixated on her admitting she slapped him first, ignoring the far more dangerous injury Brian inflicted.
So they have this evidence, this high-risk indicator right in front of them, and they made a choice. They decided to just smooth things over.
Essentially, yes. The outcome was a profound institutional failure. They concluded the whole thing was just a mental health crisis. That was their label. And they classified the official report as disorderly conduct.
Which is like a noise complaint?
Pretty much. A minor infraction, not domestic violence.
Yeah.
And that classification had huge consequences.
Because it let them avoid the proper procedures.
Exactly. It meant they bypassed mandatory legal steps. They just separated the couple for the night. Brian went to a motel. Gabby stayed with the van alone. They completely missed the legal requirement in Utah to identify and either arrest or cite the person deemed the predominant physical aggressor.
Okay. Predominant physical aggressor. That term seems really important here. They actively avoided using it. Can you explain what that Utah law actually requires? Why calling it disorderly conduct was such a critical error?
Sure. The Predominant Physical Aggressor Law, or PPA, it's specifically designed to stop police from just arresting both people in a dispute or automatically arresting whoever landed the first blow. The law forces officers to look deeper.
At the whole context.
Right. The history of the relationship, if known. The relative size and strength of the individuals involved, and crucially, who poses the primary threat for future harm. In this specific situation, they should have considered Brian's clear coercive control, his unnerving calmness versus her extreme distress, and the fact that he caused a physical injury to her face.
But they didn't?
No. By labeling it disorderly conduct, they treated it like a minor public disturbance. It meant they didn't have to follow the strict documentation and intervention rules required for a domestic violence incident. They effectively downgraded a potentially lethal situation into a simple spat.
That's the institutional lie right there.
Yeah.
They prioritized finding a way not to charge Gabby because she admitted hitting him, even though all the danger signs pointed to Brian.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, they basically gave him green light.
Precisely. And what's really astounding is revealed in these subsequent investigation notes and reviewing the body cam again. Officer Pratt, who was the senior officer on scene, a field training officer, he actually admitted later that Brian showed more red flags than a Chinese communist rally, his words, and recognized Brian was an emotional threat to Gabby.
He admitted that, but still didn't act.
He admitted it. But instead of applying the PPA law, he actively looked for a legal loophole. He justified it by saying incorrectly that there was no law against being a shitty boyfriend and gaslighting. That mindset, that focus on avoiding the formal DV process, it points to a fundamental breakdown in training and priorities.
So they had policies they didn't follow.
They did. The Moab Police Department failed to implement its own lethality assessment protocol, the LAP. It was technically policy, but they didn't use it.
And what would that protocol have forced them to do?
The LAP is a standardized checklist. It's a specific set of evidence-based questions officers must ask a potential victim to quickly gauge the homicide risk. Questions like, has your partner ever choked or strangled you? Do they own weapons? Have they threatened to kill you or themselves?
Things that get right to the heart of the danger.
Exactly. If they had used the LAP, which their own policy required, the risk score would have shot through the roof based on the facial injury alone. Never mind the clear psychological manipulation happening right in front of them. But the officers prioritized what they saw as an easy resolution over a mandatory legal duty. That failure, that institutional breakdown in Moab, it really set the stage for everything that followed.
So the system failed in Moab, catastrophically. Gave Brian Laundrie essentially a free pass despite all those red flags. What happens next just shows how quickly things escalated and the terrifying level of control he had in those final days.
Well, after that Moab incident on August 12th, the timeline really speeds up towards the tragedy. Brian flew home to Florida alone on August 17th. The stated reason was to close a storage unit, retrieve some items.
He's odd at the time, right? Flying back mid-trip.
It raised eyebrows, yes. He then flew back to Salt Lake City and rejoined Gabby on August 23rd. Just 2 days later, August 25th, that's the date of Gabby's last confirmed, reliable communication with her mother, Nicole Schmidt. After that, silence.
But the really chilling part comes just after that last call, August 27th. There were witnesses in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They saw Brian arguing, really aggressively, with staff at a restaurant, the Merry Piglets. And Gabby was there, visibly upset, crying. That's the last time anyone confirmed seeing Gabby Petito alive.
And based on the forensic evidence found later, the estimated date of her murder is believed to be that same day, August 27th, 2021.
Oh, God. The same day as that argument. The cause of death.
Manual strangulation and blunt force injuries to the head and neck.
So, right after that date, the suspected date of the murder, Brian shifts gears immediately. She starts building this digital cover story using her phone.
Precisely. He transitioned instantly into deception mode. The text sent from Gabby's phone after August 25th. Her family knew almost immediately something was wrong. They just didn't sound like her.
That Stan text, right? That was a big one.
Yes, the August 27th text that mentioned Stan, her grandfather. Her mom said Gabby rarely, if ever, called him Stan. It was always Grandpa. That detail immediately felt off.
And then the Yosemite text.
Right, the August 30th text saying, "No service in Yosemite." Geographically impossible. They were last seen in Wyoming. Yosemite National Park is in California, hundreds of miles away. It was a clumsy but deliberate fabrication.
Trying to make it seem like she was still alive, still traveling.
Exactly. Forensic analysis points to these texts being calculated attempts by Brian to mimic Gabby's style, but he made mistakes. Small errors in phrasing, those factual inconsistencies, they gave him away to those who knew her best.
And the purpose was purely strategic, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Twofold. First, fool the family and any initial inquiries from law enforcement into thinking Gabby was okay, just out of touch. Second, and critically, delay anyone filing a missing persons report. He needed time.
Time to drive her van.
Nearly 2,500 miles back to his parents' home in Florida, all while pretending she was fine.
And he was using her money during this time too, wasn't he? After she was likely already gone.
Yes, the financial records confirmed it. He used her debit card without authorization between August 30th and September 1st. Bank records show withdrawals or charges totaling $1,000 or more. It shows his control over her identity and resources, even after her death.
And he was seen alone even before he got back to Florida.
Correct. There was a confirmed sighting of Brian hitchhiking alone near Coulter Bay in Wyoming on August 29th. This was very shortly after Gabby's estimated time of death. It suggests he had likely already disposed of her body and was solely focused on his escape and the cover-up.
Just cool.
Yeah.
Calculated. And then he arrives home, September 1st. He pulls up in Gabby's van alone at his parents' place in Northport, Florida. Her body left behind in Wyoming. This is where the silence becomes deafening. Not just his silence, but his parents' too.
His actions upon arrival were immediate and clearly defensive. Before Gabby was even reported missing, Brian hired a lawyer, and he clammed up completely. Refused point blank to speak to police or Gabby's desperate family about where she was.
And this is where the allegations against his parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, really solidify.
Yes. The civil lawsuit filed later by Gabby's parents alleges that the Laundries knew Gabby was dead far earlier than they let on, possibly as early as August 28th.
Based on phone calls.
Based partly on a significant phone call Brian made to his mother that day, lasting almost an hour. Shortly after that call, his father contacted an attorney. The lawsuit contends they knew Gabby was deceased, knew Brian was involved, but chose to say nothing, actively obstructing the search while Gabby's family was going through hell.
And worse than just silence, they participated in this performance of false hope, putting out statements saying they hoped Gabby would be found safe and sound.
While allegedly knowing she was already dead, a Florida judge overseeing the civil suit later described that specific behavior as particularly callous and cruel, acknowledging the immense emotional distress it inflicted.
It's just sickening. And then the camping trip. While Gabby is missing, while her family is frantic, they go camping.
It seems unbelievable, but yes. Between September 6th and 8th, shortly after Brian returned home alone and lawyered up, the Laundrie family went on a short camping trip together to Fort DeSoto Park.
What possible reason could they have for that?
From the outside, it looks like a calculated display of normalcy. An attempt to project that everything was fine, maybe throw off suspicion, buy more time before the inevitable storm hit. But for Gabby's family, watching this unfold while searching for their daughter, the silence, the lawyer, the camping trip, it was pure agony, a kind of psychological torture.
So the silence couldn't hold. Gabby's family wouldn't let it. They forced the issue and things started moving incredibly fast.
They did. Gabby's family officially reported her missing on September 11th. Just 4 days later, September 15th, Brian Laundrie was officially named a person of interest by the Northport police.
But then the narrative got twisted, didn't it?
It did, almost immediately. On September 17th, just 2 days after Brian was named a person of interest, his parents reported him missing. They claimed he'd gone hiking in the nearby Carlton Reserve on September 13th and hadn't returned.
Which instantly shifted the focus.
Completely. It turned it into a multi-missing person case, at least temporarily. Law enforcement resources were suddenly split, trying to locate both Gabby and Brian. It complicated the primary investigation into Gabby's disappearance significantly.
But the truth about Gabby, that couldn't be hidden by their games.
No. On September 19th, the worst fears were confirmed. Search teams discovered human remains in the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Wyoming, near where the van was last seen. They were later identified as Gabby Petito.
The search was over. But the horror was just beginning.
The official confirmation came on October 12th. The Teton County coroner announced the cause of death, homicide. Specifically, death by manual strangulation and blunt force injuries to her head and neck.
Manual strangulation, it's so personal, so violent.
It is, and the coroner estimated the time of death as late August. This timeline aligned perfectly with her last communications, the witnesses seeing them argue, and the start of Brian's fabricated texts and debit card usage. It decisively ruled out any possibility of an accident.
So, with Gabby found, the entire focus became finding Brian Laundrie. And that search, because of his parents' delayed report and maybe even misleading information about when he left, it dragged on.
It was massive and intensive. It lasted 32 days. A major complicating factor was that the specific area of the Carlton Reserve where his parents initially suggested he might be was heavily flooded during the early parts of the search. This forced search teams to expand efforts elsewhere, costing valuable time.
Until the waters went down.
Exactly. On October 20th, as the water levels receded in the Miakahatchee Creek Environmental Park, which connects to the Carlton Reserve, searchers found partial human remains. They were confirmed to be Brian Laundrie's.
And they found his things nearby.
Yes. Along with the remains, they recovered a backpack, a revolver, and the item that would provide the final piece of the puzzle, a notebook.
His death was ruled a suicide.
Correct. On November 23rd, the medical examiner confirmed Brian Laundrie died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head.
So Brian was gone.
Yeah.
But the notebook that held his final words, his side of the story, right?
It did. The FBI concluded its investigation on January 21st, 2022. They announced that the notebook, found near Brian's remains, contained written statements where he claimed responsibility for Gabby's death.
Claimed responsibility.
Yeah.
But how? Did he confess to murder?
Not exactly, and the way he phrased it is incredibly revealing and, frankly, chilling.
What did he write?
According to the FBI report summarizing the notebook's contents, Brian wrote, "I ended her life." Then he added, "I thought it was merciful that it is what she wanted."
Merciful. He thought killing her was merciful. That's unbelievable.
It's a complete inversion of reality. It attempts to frame a brutal homicide as some kind of compassionate act.
That's not a confession. That's a justification. A final, self-serving lie to paint himself in a better light, even in death.
Precisely. It's the narrative of a perpetrator trying to rationalize the absolute control inherent in taking someone's life. Gabby's mother, Nicole Schmidt, saw it exactly for what it was. She called it ridiculous and said Brian was just trying to look like the good guy, even after everything.
It fits perfectly with the pattern of manipulation, doesn't it? Control was everything to him, right to the end. He couldn't even take responsibility honestly in a suicide note.
Psychologically, it's entirely consistent. A final attempt to control the narrative, to avoid facing the bald truth of his actions.
And speaking of the family's role, we have to mention that letter. The burn after reading letter from his mother, Roberta.
Yes, that surfaced during the civil litigation between the families, an undated letter from Roberta Laundrie to Brian. Its existence added another really dark layer to the questions surrounding the parents' knowledge and complicity.
What did it supposedly say? Something about helping him?
Reports indicate the letter contained disturbing phrases, including an offer that if Brian went to jail, she would bake a cake with a file in it. And perhaps most chillingly, a statement saying she would show up with a shovel and garbage bags if he needed help disposing of a body.
Oh my God. Shovel and garbage bags.
That's what was alleged in court documents. Now, her attorneys fought hard against its release, claiming it was written before the trip even began, that it was just hyperbole, farcical, and unrelated to Gabby's death.
But the timing doesn't really matter for the implication, does it? Whether before or after, it suggests a mindset, an environment where that kind of thinking, that level of unconditional support for potentially criminal acts, was somehow normalized within the family.
Legally, the date is relevant. But in the context of their subsequent actions, the immediate lawyer, the silence, the camping trip, the content of that letter, whenever it was written, resonates powerfully. It certainly compounded the anguish for Gabby's family, suggesting a pre-existing willingness to cover things up. So looking back at the aftermath, the legal and institutional reckoning really zeroed in on that critical failure point. The police encounter in Moab on August 12th.
That's where the wrongful death lawsuit came in, right?
Yeah.
Filed by Gabby's parents against the Moab police.
Exactly. A multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the Moab Police Department, the city, and the individual officers involved. The core argument was negligence, that their failure to recognize and act upon the obvious life-threatening danger Gabby was in directly contributed to or enabled her subsequent homicide.
And the internal reviews, did they back that up?
An independent investigation review of the Moab incident was pretty scathing. It found multiple unintentional mistakes. Specifically, it highlighted the officers' severe misapplication of Utah's predominant physical aggressor law, the one they seemed determined to avoid using.
And the lethality assessment protocol.
A complete failure to implement it. They didn't ask the required questions. They defaulted to classifying it as a mental health issue, completely overlooking the significance of Brian grabbing Gabby's face, that key physical injury, that known precursor to strangulation.
It's just a cascade of failures.
Yeah.
But did anything actually change because of this? Any real reform?
Yes, actually. This tragedy, as devastating as it was, became a direct catalyst for tangible legislative change in Utah. Senate Bill 117 was passed and signed into law, taking effect July 1st, 2023.
What does SB 117 do?
It mandates the use of specific lethality assessment tools like the LAP during domestic violence calls. It essentially removes officer discretion in that initial risk assessment phase. They are now legally required to ask those specific questions to gauge the danger level before deciding not to make an arrest. The goal is to force recognition of high-risk indicators, regardless of how the individuals are presenting emotionally.
So they have to look past the performance now, past the victim maybe trying to downplay things.
That's the intent, to rely on scientifically validated risk factors, not just gut feelings or who seems calmer. It's a significant step, directly born from this case.
Beyond the legal changes, though, Gabby's story just exploded culturally, didn't it? The van life angle, the social media presence, the body cam footage.
Yeah.
It was everywhere.
It received sensational, truly global media coverage. And that intense focus inevitably brought renewed attention to a long-standing issue, the phenomenon often called missing white women syndrome, or MWWS.
Yeah, the idea that cases involving young, attractive white women get disproportionately more media attention and resources than cases involving missing people of color or from other marginalized groups.
The contrast was stark and undeniable in this instance. While the world was mobilized, searching for Gabby and later, for Brian, advocates pointed to the vastly lower levels of coverage and official urgency for other missing persons, especially Indigenous women in Wyoming, the very state where Gabby's body was found, where there's an ongoing crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people.
And other cases, like Daniel Robinson in Arizona.
Exactly. Cases involving people of color often struggle to get anywhere near the same level of sustained national media attention or the same allocation of law enforcement resources that were deployed in the Laundrie search.
So in a way, the massive attention on Gabby, while driven by genuine concern, also threw this systemic bias into really sharp relief.
It did. It forced a difficult societal conversation. It showed how that curated image of perfection could mask unimaginable suffering, yes. But the sheer scale of the response also exposed these deep, often fatal, inherent biases in who gets attention, who gets searched for, whose stories are deemed worthy of national outrage. It really pulled back the curtain on those institutional and cultural blind spots.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if we try to find some enduring meaning or legacy from Gabby Petito's tragic story, perhaps it's not just the memory of the crime itself, however sensational it was. Maybe the most significant outcome is the push for these compulsory legal mechanisms like Utah's SB 117. Systems designed to force intervention to ensure those subtle but critical indicators of strangulation risk and coercive control are never again dismissed as just an argument or a mental health crisis.
It aims to remove the guesswork, the bias, at that crucial moment.
That's the hope. To compel action when a life, like Gabby's in Moab, hangs precariously in the balance.
It leads to a really difficult final question for all of us, though. We saw the evidence in Moab, the strangulation precursor, the coercive control. It was documented.
It was filmed, and yet it was dismissed. So beyond new laws and protocols, what deeper systemic changes do we need? How do we truly equip first responders, police, paramedics, everyone on the front lines to recognize the victim and understand the danger they're in, even when that victim, out of fear or manipulation, is actively protecting their aggressor? That feels like the core challenge, the deepest lie we still need to unravel.